thank you for coming, and I have to thank the weather gods because the weather is amazing. And I'm going to start off today with something that had touched Carl. It was one of the quotes of William Penn, and Chiara is here to read it. Can you sit up and...
Yes.
Oh, no.
Fruits of Solitude by William Penn. Death is but a crossing the world, as friends do the seas. They live in one another still. This is the comfort of friends, that though they may be said to die, yet their friendship and society are, in the best sense, ever present, because immortal.
Thank you, Suzette. You did great. That was wonderful. Thank you. All right. So there are a few people who would like to say a few words. Who would like to volunteer to start off? Would you, Lorenzo?
No pressure. Like to volunteer.
You have to stand up. Fantastic.
I thought there was an order of proceedings that you circulated, but I guess you don't remember it. Okay, I'm going to sort of speak a little bit from the Ferry family side, who's known Carl for the past 15 years. And we're very close.
25 years, yeah.
What?
25.
25. I said
Okay.
25. I said 25.
Mass is not a strong point.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're here to sort of give you a perspective of as we celebrate and remember the life of Carl Emmons from our perspective. So, when I was putting together this sort of a short speech, it's only 7 pages, so we should be able to get through it before the rain comes. I asked the children, his grandkids, to come up with some adjectives to describe Carl. And so can't put them all here because we've screened off a few of them.
Yeah.
But the ones that stood out, principled. He was strong-willed and had strong beliefs. He was uncompromising in his beliefs sometimes, as we all know. He was honest, brutally honest.
Yes.
But what's great is that you knew what you were getting with Carl. There was no hidden agenda. There was no second guessing what he thought, because he told you what he thought. So his honesty came through and shone through. He was never duplicitous. He was unbridled. He wouldn't hold back. Got into trouble sometimes. But again, you knew what you were getting. He was an open book, and he liked order. He was the antithesis of chaos. He wanted things done a certain way. And unfortunately, Mum is chaotic. He married a chaotic woman. But he brought order to everything he did. He wanted a clear order. And the thing that really struck me the most was he was a passionate person.
Yeah.
He was passionate about many things, as you can see from what we saw inside in the garage. He was passionate about sports, both personally as well as he was an avid sports fan. He played hockey well into his later life. Even when we moved here, he was still playing hockey. He was a huge sports fan. Detroit Red Wings was his team. And I remember at our wedding in Toronto, not far from where he went to school, the Detroit Red Wings were in the playoffs. And it was right before they hit one of their second or third dynasties with Scotty Bowman as their coach. So he was, any spare moment he had, he was upstairs watching the Red Wings play as we were prepared for our wedding. He was passionate about literature. He was an avid reader. He read his preferences were for the classics. I think there's at least 12 copies of The Great Gatsby in that somewhere in every floor of that building. And he was passionate about education. He had a true belief in education and teaching. This is at the personal level, from his schooling initially in Grosse Pointe to Appleby College in Southern Ontario. And then really he developed a lifelong commitment dedication to his high school graduation, which is the Avon Old Farms in Connecticut. And he kept that. That was a lifelong relationship he had with that school. He went to Middlebury College, not far from here, and finally graduated from Columbia. He was passionate about teaching at every level, at the high school, at the university. We have some of his colleagues here from Norwich University. He was an excellent English teacher. He taught many things to our kids. He taught them good manners, table manners particularly. Hopefully he'll go
No
to-
elbows on the table.
So he
Pronunciation.
loved teaching his grandkids, Chucky, Lukey, Dante, Chiara, and Luca. I remember vividly him taking Dante when he was, I think, Dante was 14, maybe 2 years too early to start learning how to drive. You know, they pick him up here, they go off, and they drive along the roads of unsuspecting roads of Vermont.
Terrifying his mother.
Yes. Sometimes he would take his love for teaching and education a little too far. I remember the first time I met him, he corrected my English. The first time I met him, literally. It could have been something, maybe I said something really wrong, like maybe it was instead of macabre, I said macabre or something like that. But I really think it was something like, it could go both ways, like potato, or something like that. But he corrected my English the first time I met him. So he couldn't take that things being said where he did not think was the right way of saying things. He so strongly valued education that at a late age, well into his late 50s, he undertook a graduate certificate at the Museum of Sciences at Boston University. You can see there's a photograph of him with his degree. This was not to get another job or anything like that. No, he wasn't going to do that. This is really I think it was to curate his own collections. He has his own collection of antiques. As you've been through, if anyone's been to that house, you'll see Carl took collector collection to an extreme. He was a pro at collecting. I would say it was almost bordered on hoarding, but he would collect anything. There's too many to go over, but I remember going through these. Some of them he inherited, and he bolstered. Other things he went whole hog into collecting. When Mom started going to these art shows, he identified wood turning, and so he loved wood turning. And he ended up buying like 50 pieces of wood. I think someone's whole itinerary collection of wood turning carvings he ended up collecting. A couple things that I remember vividly, he had that sort of stand out to me is his antique wall clocks. Someone might have one or two of them. Carl had maybe 7 units. They were like 2 or 3 in every single room in that house.
It would drive me crazy
It
because
would.
they would be chiming at different times.
Tick-tocking
So he
all night
would
long.
spend hours
Not coordinated either,
fine-tuning them and then winding these clocks, which is really ironic to spend so much time on the device that keeps time. He would go every room you click, and be going off at different times. The one that I remember vividly, when it was early before they moved here, was his Scrimshaw collection, which I did not know what Scrimshaw was until I actually met Carl. One of the first times I met him, he was wearing a t-shirt. He proudly wore this t-shirt. It was something like the 1990 10th annual Nantucket Scrimshaw. It was a marathon of Scrimshaw from Nantucket. So he took that seriously. I'm sure if there was like a Scrimshaw, a Palooza, he would be in the front row. He loved Scrimshaw. And I must admit, we now have a couple pieces of Scrimshaw that we proudly sort of display in our house in Montreal in memory of Carl. So in 1999, Carl and Mom moved to Vermont from Massachusetts, moved to this farmhouse that we're in right now. We're not exactly sure why, but perhaps it was to he had to move across state lines and find a house big enough to put all his collections. And I think that part of it is the reason why we chose this place, because it's so big that you can fit much of his collections everywhere. But farming did not come easily to Carl. It's sort of ironic that you would come to Vermont to be a farmer, but it wasn't his forte. As those of you who do farm, there's like a natural rhythmic chaos that dictates life on a farm in Vermont. And chaos, as I mentioned, really was not his forte. And it sort of threatened his unbridled sense of order. A couple of things I remember vividly was like Mom, like when they first moved here, Mom was trying to make these stone walls you see everywhere. She was hauling boulders and putting them into wheelbarrows and putting them around, while Carl was in there vacuuming dead flies from the windowsills. and I mean, that's like bugs. That's a battle you're going to lose. Bugs in Vermont, they are everywhere, you know. And so he's there sucking. That's like a Herculean task, like the Augean stables, and he's there, sucking away at these flies. There are going to be many more. That's a battle he's going to have to lose. You used to have to close all the doors just in case the bugs will come in. They're going to get in. They're going to get in. Another thing. So he definitely had a losing battle with bugs because there are so many varmint here in Vermont. And one of the varmint stories I love about Carl is that for a while there was like a skunk who came to live, I think, in that part of the shed. And so Mom and Carl bought a humane trap, and they trap the skunk.
Right? Yeah.
Then they'll bring it up to the top of that hill, release it, and then I remember coming down one time, and he says, we have an absolute plague of skunks. Every day we're collecting, like we're trapping one or two of them. We go up and release, and then the next day they're back again, and it must be like a plague of skunks. So we went on a trip once with him and see where he dropped these guys off. And so he dropped them, it wasn't that far, like maybe halfway up that hill, and the skunk just got out, started walking, trotting down to here again. So it was the same skunk that he picked up and released. When we suggested it might be the same skunk, he got very angry. No, that's an absolute plague. Definitely, it's a plague of skunks. No, I think it's the same one. So he wasn't, again, farming didn't come naturally to him. But there was one area where Carl's sort of uncompromising and strong-willed nature did serve him well in one aspect of Vermont life. And he did win a battle with Vermont's grass. So he would love being on a lawnmower. 2 times a week this stuff would be, Greg Norman would be proud of this grass, because he would go zig and zag across the lawns, the 7 acres of lawns that are on this property, and make it look beautiful. So he had his battle and he won that battle. He sort of created order where there was chaos. So of his reverse entropy, he won that battle. And I remember vividly our kids going on the lawnmower, Carl taking them off in their first time driving, a little bit younger than Dante, but Luca and Kiara are probably around 4 or 5, and they're driving the wheel of the lawnmower with his their mother yelling. But he was very proud. He loved lowering them on, and I have a beautiful video of him taking Kiara and Luca with him along with his multiple hours that he would spend a week on the lawn mowing. So, well, it's hard to say to remember Carl and not remember the last 8 years, which have been really difficult. Last 8 years really were particularly challenging, and we can't brush over those 8 years because that was part of his life. I remember, I guess 8, 9, almost a decade ago, we were here, and he shows me something on his leg, an ulcer on his leg. I had, not sure what it was. I eventually, when we found out what the diagnosis was, I'd read about it in medical school. I'd never seen this condition before, this pyodermic gangrenosum that ended up debilitating Carl and robbing him of so much energy and vitality that he had. He had, after speaking to some of my dermatologist colleagues, a condition that really was the severity of that extremely rare condition was so much that it was probably a handful in North America who had it as severe as Carl did. And you can't point fingers at him. This is something that just happens, and it robbed him of his energy, his vitality, and ultimately it robbed him of his life. Although this illness caused his body to fail, something that never weakened, and I can't believe we do this over Carl. I mean, like, seriously, Carl would yell at me for tearing up. You know he would yell at me. Although the illness caused his body to fail, something that never weakened, something never faltered, was his sharp intellect, and above all else, his love for his for his grandchildren and for Mom.
Thank you.
He had sometimes was at odds between his principal sense of order and had a real difficulty time sometimes expressing this love, but it was always there, and it was always shine through. And I'll definitely miss Carl. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bravo.
Very
Well done.
nice.
Bravo.
One of the people who wanted to come here so badly, and unfortunately she had problems and couldn't, was Lydia, his first wife, and Chase's mother. Here's Chase. Chase, would you please come here for a second?
Sure.
Come here. I want to introduce Chase to
Hello,
everybody.
everybody.
Because it isn't, maybe some of you don't know Chase, but this is Carl's
I'm in the
son.
pictures in the garage.
Oh, so many of them. Oh my lordy. Anyway, that's it. I just wanted people to know that who you are.
Yep.
And Chase actually is a beekeeper, and for a while he had bees here,
Yep.
and now he doesn't.
And that's it.
But
Where do
but
you live?
Where do I live? Down in Western Massachusetts.
Oh, okay.
So not actually too far from here.
but also he was an official beekeeper in New York.
I still
Am
am.
I correct?
Yes. I kept and I keep bees on top of buildings in Manhattan and Brooklyn.
All right.
You can ask me all about it. It's not, while I'm here, it's fine.
Cool.
I also just want to say I don't, I don't have a sort of a really beautiful statement the way Lorenzo did. I'm more of a, I don't know if you know, but he taught at the high school I ultimately went to. Thank God I didn't actually have him as a teacher. That would not have gone well. But he got to at least oversee my shenanigans. And I posted, when he passed, I posted a statement to the student group on Facebook for that. And that would perfectly convey my sentiments about how I felt about my father and just everything about him. But I'm happy to tell you stories and whatever, just sort of like not standing here talking to you. So come up and ask me questions if you want.
Okay.
I'll be around.
Okay. But I do have an email from Lydia because she really, really wanted to come. But I would like to read it to you, and it's quite long. So settle in, guys. Anybody want some?
Have at it.
Okay. Okay.
You bring wine
Oh,
around.
Luca, come help me.
Okay, this stuff.
The tray sandwiches.
And sandwich.
Oh, joking.
That was a joke.
Stop it. Wait. Okay. In the beginning, there was an English class at Columbia. The year was 1965. I looked around and I saw a nice looking young man. I remember thinking, what a shame he's married. But as it turned out, he wasn't. His prep school ring kept on twisting on his finger and looked like a wedding band. He drove a beaten up old red Renault and was very patient trying to figure out what I was saying. Actually, I spoke hardly any English. He lived in the village in a railroad apartment, which then became our home. He had non-stop energy. There's that energy again, guys. He was also an eternal adolescent. His escapades brought him to the brink of a little jail time on many an occasion. He liked to go out at night on a scavenger hunt. He would shimmy up signposts on street corners to take down the old-fashioned village street signs. I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah?
It's pretty bad, huh?
One time, as he was about to come back down with his loot in hand, he saw two cops waiting for him at the curb. They were about to take him into the precinct, but he quickly told them that he was a student at NYU and he was pledging a fraternity. They let him go. I wonder what has become of all those lovely street signs he collected. They don't make them like that anymore. He looked for old furniture that people had discarded on the street. He would work on these shabby-looking pieces until he brought out the beauty in them. We had a lovely old oak coffee table with a marble top, and the best piece was a delicate old oak settee with mother-pearl inlays. He eventually gave this to my brother. It is still beautiful, standing in their living room. We married, and we had Chase. Once or twice a year, we drove to Grosse Pointe Farms to visit his parents. We drove from New York via Buffalo and through Canada. By that time, we had a large cat named Ulysses, and of course, a guinea pig. George the 10th. I lost count which George he was. They didn't live very long. We put the baby in a basket in the back seat. No seat belts in those days. Underneath the basket, we hid the cat in a cat box, as well as the guinea pig in a small cage. We were never caught. His mother and father didn't mind the menagerie. Nice temporary addition to their minor bird Sam, who lived in a large cage in the bay window in the kitchen. I don't know where that bird came from, but he was famous for his wolf whistle whenever a comely young maiden entered the kitchen. And if he was upset, he spread his puny little wings, looked menacing and croaked, "Stand back, I'm an eagle." Carl had a neat little moustache and beard at the time, which his mother hated. The first morning we were there, Carl came down for breakfast. They had a nice conversation, and finally Carl said, "Don't you notice anything different about me?" His mother took another look from across the table and realized that Carl had shaved his face. She told me afterwards that she hated that beard so much, she refused to even acknowledge it, so she didn't realize it was gone. We were ill-matched for marriage, but we made excellent lifelong friends. He would bring over girlfriends and potential wives for a look-see, asking my opinion. He thought I was the one best equipped to see a promise for happiness or a likely disaster. Carl was Maggie's first babysitter. Maggie is Lydia's daughter from her relationship with Nicholas. Okay. Carl was Maggie's first babysitter. Nicholas and I trusted him before we let anyone else take care of her. He also taught her how to ice skate, came to her graduation from Harvard with Anna, and joined us at her engagement party and her wedding. He was family. I will always remember his energy, almost radiating out from his skin. The way he enjoyed life and sought adventures of all kinds. We loved him and we miss him dearly. That is from Lydia.
Nice.
Wow. Would somebody else like to come on up and share some thoughts, some remembrances, some memories of Carl? Harry's going to stay put and talk. And we can turn.
Yeah.
This is Harry, who is Carl's eldest brother, and has known Carl all his life.
Whether he wants
Okay,
it to or
so
not.
talk loudly so we can all hear.
I remember talking to Chase about Carl's roof garden. And particularly one incident was hammered into my brain. And that was, they had the roof garden, and one day they found somebody up there in the roof garden taking things and that.
Harry,
that's-
would you like me to just help out a little bit with this story?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. It was my rooftop garden.
Oh, your rooftop garden.
Yes. Yes. My last company was a large rooftop farm company in New York City, and I brought my father and Anna to come see one of our large ones in Queens, New York, and we discovered a TV production crew up there with people like Penn and Teller and some other celebrities. And would you like to tell the rest of what the TV show was and who was involved?
Well, simply, it was a rather famous person who was involved with that. He later became President Trump.
No way.
It was The Apprentice. Without our permission and without a location agreement.
Wow.
But before he was even really running, so we had no idea what we got to lay claim to.
Wow. Did you bust him?
Not only did we bust them, but my sister, Maggie, was at the time a high-powered entertainment attorney. She's now a partner at Endeavor. I immediately called her and said, how are we going to get every single penny out of these people we can? Because they were trespassing and they had finished shooting the whole episode.
Wow. Without permission. So.
Without permission, without anything.
Wow.
Literally, they just showed up.
Wow, that's crazy.
And
That's very like him.
With Maggie's help, we got paid a tidy sum from them, which was
All
great.
right.
But here's the kicker. Trump wasn't actually on the roof. He was downstairs with Henson Studios, who were in the building where they had done the actual episode. They came up to the roof to do the after shots with the Manhattan in the background. It was a fantastic location. And I asked the director, or actually the producer, I'm like, well, where's Trump? And he said, straight face, without any joke whatsoever, it's too windy up here. I shit you not. Anyways.
Well, thank you both of you for the story. That was a good story. Great story.
But that was my father's and Anna's introduction to my then, company of, wait, who are all these people? What are they doing up here?
Amazing, yeah.
Anyways.
Great. I have something to say.
Come on up here.
So, I have not rehearsed. I never thought I'd be doing this, but honestly, Carl was a good person. He really loved my children, and he was wonderful with children because he loved to teach. He was a born teacher. The second he met my kids, he connected with them on a level that I could never, because I was their mom, but he connected with them on a deeper level where he understood how their brains worked. He understood how to speak in a language that they understood. He corrected their English, but they didn't care. They wanted to learn from him. He made them hungry to learn more. Carl loved hockey, and my sons both played hockey, and that was an amazing thing for them. Here there's an adult who's not their father, who's saying, go do it, go for it, you can do this. And they were goalies. So to be a goalie is really intimidating, and Carl was always courageous and encouraging them to be the best that they could be on the ice and off the ice, and to be the best students they can be, the best men that they could be. And they both grew to really good, strong men, and I think part of that was Carl's influence. And that's what I think about Carl. He was a really good man. He was wonderful to our children. When he got sick, it was hard because he changed. that wasn't the Carl that I knew when I first met Carl. I love Carl. I love Carl. I've always loved Carl, and I always will love Carl. And the Carl that was here in the end wasn't the same Carl. But I love the Carl that I knew and loved, and I know that in his heart, he was a really good man, and he loved my children. So that's my remembrance of Carl.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anybody else like to come up and say something? Gina Logan.
It's a
Get
labyrinth.
through.
Here, come.
Such a lovely day, and I'm so glad to see that Carl will be remembered for a very, very long time, because he should be. Carl and I were buddies, and we were colleagues. We worked together. We taught in the English department at Norwich University together, and we also worked in the Learning Center as tutors, and I had the privilege of having the cubicle next to Carl in our tutoring center, where I could listen to him rake people over the coals in a very charming way. I first met Carl on the third floor of the building where we taught. He was coming out of the classroom that I was about to go into, and he had his hat on, that great hat, and he was sort of barreling out of the classroom, and he almost ran into me, and I said whoops, and he said fuck. And then we went and had something to drink together and started talking, and he came into my life and we became friends, and we were movie buddies. We went to the movies together very, very often, and that was also something that Carl was passionate about. And he never had to correct my grammar either.
Oh, wow.
Which probably frustrated him no end. But he was just such a lovely ball of energy and fire and fun, and we bonded over, we were both mildly reformed former juvenile delinquents, so that was a bonding. And he's one of two people in my life whom I have loved from Grosse Pointe. My second father, my adopted father, was from Grosse Pointe. And also now I have had the privilege of meeting two people who went to Avon Old Farms. The other one's Pete Seeger. And somehow, I can't see Carl and Pete, really.
No.
But he was a wonderful, loving man and a terrific person to work with and be with. And he adored his family, and he worshipped, like, he bragged about you all the time. And he, all the time. Anna this, Anna, and your gardening and your art and your cooking. And he just thought you were the rat's rubbers.
That is
So,
a weird way of
Wow.
showing it.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank
he had a
you,
hard
Gina.
time
That's
saying
so
it, but
he had a hard time saying it, but he said it to me.
No, he said all the
he
time.
said it to us.
Yeah, I'm glad. Yeah, and he talked about all of you children and grandchildren and friends and family, and I am going to miss him forever, and I know we all are too.
Thank you. Thank you, Gina. So Carl spent his teenage years at Avon Old Farms School, where he would tell me that basically if he hadn't gone there, he would have led a life of crime. I don't know how true that is, maybe he exaggerated, but it was very much all his life. He was very connected to Avon Old Farms. And I have here, I'm going to read, I'm sorry guys, I've got something else to read. This is an email from one of his classmates who regretted also not being able to come. His name was Nick Curtis, and I'm going to read what he said. I have spent a great deal of time remembering our relationship, which started in our freshman year when Carl and I roomed next door to each other. I don't remember when exactly he figured out how to take apart the wall between our rooms. But he did.
What? Oh my God.
And
Oh,
if
yeah.
memory serves me, every
yeah.
time he returned, he would show whoever was living in that room at the time his secret. He also managed to discover things about the school that were supposedly not allowed. That is, the tunnels. These were definitely out of bounds, but as such, like waving a red cape at a bull to Carl. Carl and I both were lawyers in the court system. This is at school, at least. And I ultimately became chief judge, which obviously led to our facing off on occasion. He was good at that, as he was debating. Carl and I were friends throughout our 4 years at Avon, so it was easy for me to take his calls when he was on the phone committee raising funds for the school. I was also aware of his generosity in this regard. Interestingly, and I gigged him about this, the later folks involved in fundraising often said that Carl told them to call me. Whenever I heard he had stepped up to the plate, I wasn't about to be outdone by him. So the wallet opened up again. So the last time I saw him, I'd quote, "Emmons, every time I hear your name, it costs me money." Of all the things, I was most proud of him when he received the Alumni Order of Old Farms, because he was so deserving of the same. He said, "Anna, we have lost a lot of our classmates to date, but none has hurt me as much. I was so looking forward to seeing both of you at our 60th. My prayers are with you as you traverse this path. Best, Nick Curtis." Wow, that is amazing.
He took me to that room and showed me how he took that wall apart.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Yeah, he told me, and I somehow can't believe this, but he told me that when he was there, he and another buddy stole a locomotive.
Yes.
How do you
I heard that
steal a
story.
Yeah, so
locomotive?
how do you steal a locomotive? Where do
How
you take it to?
steal
You mean a train?
locomotive?
Like an actual
He stole
locomotive.
a choo-choo.
Like a yeah.
A
It was
train?
on a service track, I think. I'm trying to remember the story because I heard it a million times, but I was just young enough that all I know is the basic premise is there was a locomotive on a side service track right near campus that somehow you could just start up. And him and his buddies started it up and like took it down the tracks.
Excellent.
Did he get into trouble?
You know, I can't, I don't know. I never, if they did, it wasn't anything memorable. So he got away with it as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. All right, I think that's...
Sorry, just a quick one. This is not prepared at all. Something
Oh,
that,
for
that,
heaven's
that
sake.
Lorenzo
So this is
said.
my mom's brother.
I'm
Oh.
DJ, Anne's brother. Okay? Something that Lorenzo said earlier triggered a memory. I thought just continues in this frame. When they got together, Carl came when Anne came to England to see her old family every year or two, and they'd always visit us. And I come from an old town, Faversham in Kent, and we have Britain's oldest brewery in the town. And I asked him when I first met him, does he drink beer? Yes, and some of this kind of stuff. Does he drink alcohol? And we'd like to go to a pub, and said, of course, the old English pub. So we went to a pub, had a drink, and I said, would you like another one? He said, no. Well, actually said, yes, but not here. Can we go to another pub? And I said, do you like this pub? And he said, yeah, I like it very much. I just want to visit another pub. So we went to another pub, had another drink, and then another pub, another drink, and so on. And then, finished the evening. And the next day we did the same thing. Came back a year or two later, same routine. We'd always go to as many pubs as possible, just the one drink. He came to us several occasions until he wasn't able to. During the course of these series of events, it suddenly twigged to me what he was doing, because I saw him surreptitiously slip a pub ashtray into the jacket pocket.
Naughty boy. I don't
And
know.
I hastened to him, sort of okay, so that the staff didn't hear.
Yeah.
Carl, that's thieving. You're stealing. You're a thief. He said, no, it's not. It's collecting. And so in that house somewhere are dozens of Yieldy English pub ashtrays. I'd love to know where they are.
Look, yeah, use add a glass before this.
And
a glass.
You know, I have one more quick, fun, education-related anecdote.
Well, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm coming. So you're hearing how he was like very traditional, educationally speaking, like, you know, regimented would be a reasonable word. However, he was able to look outside his box when it really came down to it. So I grew up in Greenwich Village, and one of my friends that lived a couple of buildings down, his mom had a clothing store on West 10th Street, was a kid named Adam Horowitz. Anybody heard of the Beastie Boys? Okay. So, King Ad Rock. We were friends as kids in the village kids. And then Adam ended up going to the high school I graduated from. I didn't get into that.
What's it called?
McBurney.
Okay.
I went to a high-end, a really good high school, Bronx Science. Neil deGrasse Tyson went there. I was asked to leave in the middle of my junior year. We won't get into that. That's why I went to McBurney. But Adam had been at McBurney, and we were still friends, village kids. We actually lived in, then we moved, our families moved, and we lived in buildings right next to each other. But Adam was really into his music, and Adam was in my dad was his English coach. And they had gotten to a point where they were given an opportunity to go on tour with Madonna. And he came to my father, and he was like, I have to drop out of school to do this. Now, you would think first thing my father would be like, no way, kid, stay in school. Like, this rock and roll thing isn't going to get you anywhere. He looked at Adam and said, go, do it. Now, the thing is, I had sort of heard about this, and I thought maybe there was some embellishment to it or not. And then in the early 2000s, there was a Vanity Fair article interviewing the Beasties, and Adam told the story and said, I owe my career to Mr. Adams.
Oh, wow.
So that's the first anecdote that I thought showed that he could think outside his educational box. The second one was me. So to say that traditional education wasn't my style would be an understatement. As I said, I was asked to leave one school, went to another, barely got out of that one without my father's help. With my father's help. And after high school, I went to college for one semester. And at the end of that semester, I got a letter in the mail that said, your average GPA for this past semester was 0.75. We suggest you take some time off to decide whether or not you want to continue back at our school. So I was languishing in the village selling skateboards out of a skateboard shop. And my father and his partner had gotten involved with this Princeton Review thing. Now, I had taken Princeton Review as a student to prep for my SATs because my father was making extra money as an SAT tutor for this company that only existed in New York at the time. And then soon after I graduated, he and his partner had the opportunity to expand the company with a franchise. And they took southern New England, which was really western Massachusetts and Connecticut. And they moved to Simsbury, Connecticut. So at this time I was languishing in the city, a big screw up, selling skateboards. However, I was always a bit of a computer nerd. My mom had gotten me an Apple II in the early 80s, and it was my thing. So as much of a academic screw up as I was a nerd for this stuff. He called me one day and said, look, you're wasting your life selling skateboards. Me and my partner have to use this infernal machine. It's called an IBM AT. We don't know how the hell to deal with this thing. Come up to Simsbury, run our computer for us. And thank God I said yes. Because how she said he was like, if I didn't go to Avon, I would have been living a life of crime. I was beginning to live that life. But I went up to Simsbury and started running their computer for them, 18 years old. The number of fights me and my dad got into, who knows? but I was probably one of an absolute nightmare, and how he tolerated me, I don't know. But I guess good IT was hard to find back then. So, yeah, and then I realized I was actually good at running this company with him, and we split with his partner and took over just Western Massachusetts, and we lived in a part, like, we bought a house, and we lived together in the same area where we had the office. So I had a bedroom, he had a bedroom, and the office for the Princeton Review of New England was in our living room. Again, the number of fights, who knows? But we kept it going, and if it weren't for him, I would have lived that life of crime. Who knows where I'd be today? But because of him, like, I realized my thing was running small businesses and building them, and we worked just well enough together to not kill each other. And then he retired from Princeton Review in the early 90s, and myself and my significant other, Karen, over here, took it over, and here I am today. So his regimented educational viewpoint was able to bend when it really counted.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Yep.
Well, now, just because I can,
Oh, okay.
I'll extend that story. Hi, everybody. I'm Karen. I'm the, I guess, technically the unofficial daughter-in-law, but since it's been damn near 30 years at this point, I figure it's about as official as it's gonna get. I met Chase just about the same time that Carl met Anna. It's like Anna's been part of the life, like in the entire time that I've been, that I was in Carl's life. So one of the things that really stood out for me with Carl is his extreme generosity. So as Chase mentioned, Carl decided to retire from running the Princeton Review in the mid-90s, and this was sort of when I had come on the scene. I was a recent college grad with no real track record for anything in the real world, and yet Carl was very willing to go, "You seem smart and capable. Yes, please run this business on my behalf with my son while I go off and do other things." And it was such an enormous leap of faith, I think, on his part, but also just his trust in me to do this, and this sort of generosity of spirit and belief, like, hey, you know what? You are probably maybe the person in this group closest in energy level to Carl, in terms of just an intensity of saying yeah, let's get stuff done. And I think he really recognized that and was happy to sort of cultivate that within me. And I think my nerdiness for very traditional academia, I mean, I'm now a business professor, so I think that probably also helped to win him over in terms of any potential concerns he had about Chase running the business on his own. So I will deeply miss Carl. He was a big part of my life, and I'm really glad everybody was able to be here today.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I'll say something about Carl.
All right, Jeannie. This is Jeannie. Jeannie Beckwith.
Hi, if it's okay, I won't come up
stay
there. I was mentioning to someone, to you as we were coming in, that I knew Carl. I knew Carl at Norwich, almost from the day I arrived at Norwich. We worked together. I got to know him. I will say one thing. I thought you walked on water, Chase.
Yes.
When your dad talked about you,
Yes.
it was you. Mwah, he was. It was. This glow would come over him. So I know who Carl was and how you probably railed with him. But to me, and to I think all of us, you were his heart, and that was just one of the many things about Carl. I love. He and I had very similar points of view about the world, and we still managed to fight. And I also dragged Carl into the theater scene here in Vermont. And it was kind of a joke. Oh, how did you direct Carl? Carl took theater seriously. He took all art seriously. And he actually was pretty easy to direct. Now, the drive up to Unadilla sometimes, there was one time I remembered having to slam on the brakes and say, I'm going to turn this car around. Because he had gotten into let us say, a kerfluffle with another actor. And then Carl was very, okay, yes, ma'am. And he could do that. And he was brilliant. He was a brilliant man. And when he left Norwich, I ended up having to take a class that was scheduled for Carl. He was supposed to be teaching it. And I walked into that class and there was a revolt. Those students said, well, what are you doing here? And I had to explain to him, well, Carl isn't coming back. And I thought they were going to walk out because most of them had taken him for the first class in the series, and they loved him. And we had a happy day in class just talking about what made Carl a great teacher and also what made him a great friend. He was, I'm happy, I haven't seen him for a few years, but the last time I saw him, I got to kiss him several times, and he didn't seem to mind. So it was okay.
Was that when he had lost his leg?
Yes, he had lost his leg,
Yeah.
and we ran into you folks out somewhere. I was so surprised to see Carl.
Oh, was that when we were eating out together?
Yeah,
That's right.
and we were at another, anyway, just I could come up with stories about Carl and our getting up to stuff. And because it was like being a teenager again when you hung out with Carl. So I guess that juvenile delinquent thing never quite went away. Yeah. Anyway, and he loved you, Anna. I will admit, I will say what Gina said, double. You know, you were the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Gina. Well, I think wow.
Oh, Anna.
Okay, Harry.
This is totally off base. Somebody dropped this in my lap,
Oh,
and I don't know who.
oh.
Mom
must have done that.
Mom
I
did
must have
that. I
done
think
that,
you're
yeah.
just holding it for us.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
here,
yeah,
here,
okay.
Okay.
Guys, I think that we've sat here, we've said wonderful things about Carl, and I think that maybe we could, Irene, my daughter here, made some amazing sandwiches, and I think that she would be happy if we were to eat them. Because she made a lot of them. Am I correct, darling? Yeah.
Just leave the chairs, they're fine. Or do you want us to pile the chairs
No,
up?
don't worry about anything. But,
Okay.
over here,
Great.
so we can wet our whistle as well.